Thank you all for being here. I am George Dikaios in Greek, lecturer at the Department of Ports Management and Shipping at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens, and a senior research fellow at the UNESCO Chair on Climate Diplomacy and MEP. It is a great pleasure chairing this panel on ensuring equitable outcomes in the shift to a sustainable economy with an impressive lineup. To my right, Dr. Kostas Bakoyannis, President of the Commission for the Environment, Climate Change and Energy at the European Committee of the Regions. Maria Damanaki, Independent Advisor on Climate and Oceans and former European Commissioner for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Mathieu Vallart, Sustainability Director at Eldorado Gold. Alex Kotsopoulos, Partner at RSM Canada, and Professor Yanis Amor, Executive Director of the Center of Sustainable Development and Assistant Professor at Columbia University. Having a panel with a title like this and with politicians, experts, and industry stakeholders, I couldn't help myself but wonder what sustainable economy means. Is it an economy that follows a business as usual plan in order to be sustainable itself? Or is it an economy that thrives to contribute to the notion of sustainable development, namely the interrelation between environmental protection, social cohesion, and economic development? Sustainability and green aspects have prevailed in our everyday life, leading to many discussions of what actions could be considered greenwashing and what activities are essentially contribute to green goals and equitable outcomes. Without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Kostas Bakoyannis to give us today's European and global perspectives on climate change and energy. Kosta, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's a true pleasure to be here. It's a privilege to join such an exceptional panel. Now, I'm supposed to give you the outlook or what's happening around the world. Well, I think you will all agree that it's a horror movie. Now, the worst part about it is that it's not a nightmare from which we're going to wake up. So I think it's up to us to understand three things: the what, the how, and the who. So if you allow me to speak from the perspective of sustainability. Oftentimes, we are told that we have to choose between competitiveness and defense, between sustainability and a just economy. I believe that this is a false choice. And we have to be very, very clear about this. We have to be very clear about where we set our goals, where our ambitions lie. You may wonder, isn't this a bit utopian? Well, you know what? You may be surprised to know that since 1990, the European Union has cut 30% of its CO2 emissions while growing the economy by 60%. So yes, the answer, especially to our American friends, is that it can be done. Which brings us to the second question, which is the how. At the previous forum, we met with Maria Damanaki, and with her vast experience, she looked at me and said, you say all the right things, but the question is how it can be done. So you know what? We know how it can be done because we have a roadmap. We have the Draghi report, and we have the Letta report. Most of you have heard of the Draghi report. What are the main points? That before we even talk about the tariffs, the Trump tariffs, we have self-imposed tariffs in Europe in terms of regulation and red tape. Lots and lots of red tape. Over 45% in goods and over 105% in services, meaning that within the European Union, our market is actually half than that of the United States. So there's incredible space to grow, especially if you consider that since 2008, we have pumped around 2.5 trillion in our economy, while the Americans have pumped over 14 million in our economy. So yes, there is a lot of potential for Europe. And the third is the who, which is a bit more political. We have made a mistake over all these years. We thought that we could just keep things going with top-down, heavy approaches, a bureaucratic environment in the Brussels bubble. Well, you know what? We have now discovered that we need both top-down and bottom-up. We need a consensus. And this is my final point, where I think local and regional leaders from around Europe can play an active role. We have here with us the head of the region of Sterea Elada, Fanis Panos, who can testify to the role, the catalytic role that the regions and local authorities can play. It's up to us to actually start working on this bottom-up alliance. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Costa. I'm keeping from what you said that it can be done, and your optimistic point of view. I mean, I think this is very important, and we really need it because otherwise it won't be done. And that we have to move from a top-down approach to a bottom-up. And that's why I'm coming, Alex, to you, Alex Kotsopoulos. We heard this quite optimistic, again, image. I was expecting something more dark, to be honest. Bottom-up. How can business adapt to change? And how are companies promote sustainability? And how they can incorporate it in their operation?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I may actually continue the theme of optimism, if you don't mind here a little bit. But the reality is that a lot of companies, big, medium-sized, small companies, have fundamentally integrated sustainability into how they're operating. Yes, there's a long way to go, but the reality is part of this has been driven by regulatory changes, but also, frankly, by bottom-up stakeholder requirements. Investor requirements to, again, do things like fundamentally integrate climate-related risks into their risk management function. You know, we have clients that are going to great lengths to quantify the impact of climate-related risks and opportunities, for that matter, incorporating them into their risk management, enterprise risk management function. So we're seeing a lot of change. I will say, though, however, and maybe this is where I'll be a little bit pessimistic, if you don't mind, I will say, however, though, that the regulatory environment has been quite challenging, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. And so this is where I'm in full agreement with some of the changes to the sustainability reporting requirements in the EU. Because the reality is asking small and medium-sized enterprises to report out on, in some cases, 1,000 KPIs, disclosures. I mean, who's got time to do this, right? And I think this is something that I'm hopeful that we can get to a better place, because a lot of the discussion over the last few years has been around reporting requirements, internal audit, gaining assurance over your sustainability disclosures. And I think it's actually obscured us from a much more important question, which is, how do companies do sustainability? And that's where I think we can get to hopefully, and pardon the pun here, a sustainable approach to sustainability.
Thank you, Alex. And I found very interesting how we should change the regulatory environment. I mean, it's somewhere where we need to start. So it is the regulatory environment, and then we see how it works. So staying to the industry, Mathieu Vallart, I was wondering how sustainable leadership can empower communities by including them to the economic development. Can just transition, CSR, ESG, and similar notions of sustainability be combined with the economy?
Thank you. Very happy to be here. So I just want to maybe start by an initial thought around when we talk about sustainability in the industry. Something which is very important to acknowledge is the diversity and the disparity that we can find in different region between different countries, or region into the same one country. So when we talk about sustainability, it can have a very different flavor if we are Northern Greece, like our flagship project as Eldorado, or if you are in Southern Greece, or even if you are in another country in Europe. So really, it has a different flavor. And moving out into sustainability, in the industry we've been facing lots of, I would say, polarized debate, and especially in the mining, we've been having lots of polarized debate around, can we allow mining and not being sustainable, or can we do mining and not being sustainable? So it's really the invitation, and I'm going to highlight 3 specific points on which I think the industry, and especially the mining industry, have a key role in sustainability. But really the invitation is to moving beyond that polarized debate and really acknowledge the contribution that our industry can do. So, and I would like to highlight 3 main aspects. One is local economic diversification. Second one, environmental stewardship. And the third one, building trust, which are 3 pillars that are completely critical to initiate and maintain dialogue with the community and also create sustainability from the industry. So in the local economy diversification, just a few numbers I want to drop here. The mining industry in Greece has contributed more than close to 3 billion euros to the Greek GDP, and is sustaining more than 53,000 jobs in Greece, which is significant. As the level of Hellas Gold, so the Eldorado in Greece, the value distribution that the company has made in 2023 is around 350 million euros distributed into the local economy, 50% to procurement, so to suppliers, mostly Greek, 82%, I'm checking my numbers, and 15% of those numbers go for employees, which are mostly Greek. I mean, not a good representation, but 90% of our workers are Greek. So you see that with those numbers, when things are well done, that's a terrible engine that can be injected lots of power in the local economy. Maybe one focus that we do have and one blind spot that we have is skill development, on which obviously sustainability rely on people. So to have people to understand sustainability and able to implement it in the local, regional area, you do need to train skill. So we recently integrated in our flagship project, Fisheries, in northern Greece, training center on which we provide lots of training to our employees, provide sustainability trainings to all of our workers. Every single workers go through 2 days of training, including sustainability, so they can understand what means environmental stewardship, social responsibility, and all the concepts that we want to spread in the company, but through the company inside the local environment. And maybe highlighting on environmental stewardship, mining industry has been very criticized in the past, and I think we had a good reputation to turn around. And I think the invitation is for, especially in Greece, on which mining is, I would say, not very well known. It's not only talking about compliance, but also moving beyond compliance. So developing our standards, showing beyond regulation and beyond obligations what environmental stewardship means for an industry like mining. So give you just one example to not take too much time, but for example, in our operating mine in Olympias in Chalkidiki, between 21 and 24, implementation of modern technology, leading technology, allow us to reduce by 75% the water consumption. And in the design of Fisheries, our flagship project, we completely changed the design to move from conventional tailings are the waste after the mining process, from conventional tailings that generally consume lots of water, to a dry stack tailings, eliminating most of the water consumption. So that's one thing.
Thank you, Mathieu. And I'm glad that you mentioned the local action and building trust. I think it's the same discussion as the top-down and bottom-up. We had a lot of top-down from the international level. Now we need to see what it can be done from in the local level, maybe the regional as well. And you also mentioned skill development, and I think this is a very good transitioning to our academic sphere and to technological developments that are super important for any transition to come. Yanis, Amor, based on your work, what is and what will be sustainability in the future? What is the role of AI, of course, and responsible in AI, which it will be much needed for skill development, and maybe what are the risks?
Thank you so much, George. And I want to again thank the Delphi Economic Forum for giving me an opportunity to speak at this year's forum. So I might make a very bold statement, which is I truly believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, artificial intelligence and access to artificial intelligence infrastructure is going to be a necessary requirement for development and sustainable development. Why am I saying that? First, there was electrification, then came connectivity, and now there is access to AI infrastructure. So most of the audience is probably too young to remember the before electrification, but a lot of the audience will remember the before connectivity. There was a time when the global north had access to the connectivity, but if we traveled to regions of the global south, you would go to areas in rural India, areas in rural Africa, and then your phone was just not working. You didn't have access to internet. Now this is just not possible anymore, right? You can go to any area in sub-Saharan Africa, you can go to any area in rural India, and you will have access to 3G, access to 5G. Your computer will be working because it is a necessary step for development. The companies will not go to rural area if there is not access to electrification and if there's not access to connectivity. So, with the same thought, I am saying in the next 5 years, AI infrastructure or absence of AI infrastructure will be the difference between development and sustainable development. So why am I saying horizon 5 years? It took 75 years for the first 100 million people to have access to landlines. It took 16 years for 100 million people to have access to cell phones. It took only 7 years for the same 100 million people to have access to the internet. Can you guess how long it took for ChatGPT to reach 100 million people? 2 months. So I'm saying a horizon of 5 years because there is going to be a very different access to resources, and resources are going to be the determinant factor on whether or not areas will be able to develop AI infrastructure or not. In the words of Secretary General Antonio Guterres, let's make sure that AI doesn't stand for augmenting inequality. Okay, so I'm happy to report, so the World Economic Forum and IMF have very interesting studies where they're actually mapping out what we would call AI readiness. And it goes from 0, not ready, to 1, ready. And you won't be surprised to know that, of course, the United States and China are towards the 1, and then most of the African countries are still towards 0. You may have heard last week in Kigali, April 4th and 5th, was the first Africa Summit for Artificial Intelligence. Over 2,500 delegates came to discuss the future of artificial intelligence on the African continent, and they announced a $60 billion fund for development of AI specifically for the African context, which means developing the infrastructure, developing the compute power for the continent, and developing the talent. So, to tie up, I don't know, do I have 2 minutes? Okay. I'm going to plug in one of our initiatives at Columbia University, which is AI in the future of work. So we launched that 2 years ago with the idea of making sure that exceptional talent in low and middle income countries are not going to be left behind by this revolution, so that it's not mediocre Americans and mediocre UK that are going to be ahead of very talented Africans, very talented Indians. So right now, the initiative has 5 task forces: health, education, ethics, macroeconomics, and dissemination to low and middle income countries. And if I have just 1 minute to give very quickly what we are looking at. In education, we are thinking about what are the non-negotiable skills that every child from now until the future should always know and always be taught, regardless of how we advance in artificial intelligence. That it should always remain human and not be transferred over to the artificial intelligence. In health, we are thinking about the private sector. So if you are a private sector and you've developed an AI tool, how can we help you understand what are the tricks to bring it to low and middle income countries? Because there are going to be challenges, and so we will give you a roadmap to make sure that you are fully prepared. In ethics, I will skip over that in the interest of time. Macroeconomics, what we are thinking about is, does the private sector, if they had the ability, would they fire all of us and replace us with artificial intelligence? I can tell you that is not the case, but there will be a future where that might be the case, and so can there be incentives, either positive or negative, from a government side or a taxation side, where we can make sure that even when they could replace all of us with AI, they will not do that. and then of course dissemination to low and middle income country, is really making sure that all of the innovations from the global north and from Columbia universities are made available free of charge to universities all over the world.
Thank you, Yanis, for this image, and I'm glad that you stuck on technology, because what I didn't say in the beginning is that the concept of sustainable development, as initiated by the United Nations, has in its definition the use of technology in order to move to a sustainable future, which we always forget to mention. So thank you for this. And last but certainly not least, for this first round, Maria Damanaki, having also heard what has been said, what is your point of view on what is not greenwashing and how equitable outcomes can be promoted and eventually achieved?
Okay, thank you very much. So there are two questions here. More time, please. Anyway, so I really had the privilege to listen to the very, very important persons here. And perhaps we have, how can I say, to be more realistic, because what we have heard is a miracle, a world of miracles. I would like to say that I agree with these positive options, but we have to understand this is very, very difficult. And equity, for example, is a very, very difficult point if we are discussing all these issues. Equitable outcomes, it's not an easy part of the whole exercise. So if we are trying to see how we can go to improve equity, equity is a dream, I believe. It's not so realistic. But if we really want to improve our attitude in order to receive more equitable outcomes, I would like to underline 4 points. The first point is that we need an inclusive policy-making procedure. Inclusive means not only bottom-down, as you said, but also bottom-up. This is very, very important, to include partners, local communities, everybody in this process, because as you said, if people don't are near your project, even it's a mining project or a whatever project, or an artificial intelligence project, they cannot feel that they have to do something about it. So this is my first point, inclusive process making. And then we need also access to resources, opportunities. We need opportunities for the people who don't have the income or the opportunities to do so. And this means that we have to start helping startups, small, medium enterprises. I'm very happy you are doing so in Canada, and I hope worldwide, because they don't have the capability to live in this new brave world. The third point is we need social protection. For example, I can see a lot of women here in the room. Most of them are women workers. They are working. And the social care can help them with families, children, whatever. Without this, we cannot go on. Also, there are people who have no income. Unemployment is there. We cannot ignore all these phenomena just because we would like to improve competitiveness and go on. And the last point is that we really need to have monitor and control in all these exercises, otherwise it will be just a white paper. Don't forget, there are a lot of inequalities in this world. Last year, the billionaires of this world have increased their fortune 3 times more than the previous year. And at this same year, 3.6 billion people lived under poverty. And by meaning poverty, I mean $6.8 per day. So this is something we cannot ignore. Then about greenwashing. Well, greenwashing exists. Nothing is perfect, as you know. So we are going for sustainability, we are going for environment, but greenwashing is here. Under my capacity as an advisor to a lot of foundations, including the World Economic Forum that I already mentioned, I usually see, when I receive proposals, I look at 3 points. First, if there are sustainable practices in long term. What I mean in long term, you can do a lot, save energy, save water, have going through recycling projects and products, but you have to do it in a long-term case scenario, not just a shot and then forget it. This is the first point about not greenwashing. The second point is you need transparency. A serious business has to have everything transparent for everybody. There are now strict laws for big businesses, but small and medium enterprises sometimes can escape from that. So transparency is very important. And the third point is that external evaluation and certification makes a lot of sense. So if there is a big project, I would like to see 3 things, just to be sure that no greenwashing is here.
Thank you so very much for this point. I think everything is very important, so I really cannot pick up one. I think all of them need to be incorporated in our everyday function, life, operations, call it whatever you want. And we have quite a lot of time, so I'm giving you 2 to 3 minutes to reflect on what you said, on what the other panelists said, or if you want something to add on what you said initially. So please, I'm keeping the same lineup. So, Kostas.
Thank you. Well, it's been said that the pessimism of the intellect needs to be met by the optimism of the will. And I very much believe in that. So let me try and reframe what's happening around the world. We have Saint Donald, who's sitting right now in Washington, D.C. with his billionaire bros. Now, Saint Donald could help us reunite a European patriotism that we have forgotten. To put it in yet another way, ladies and gentlemen, what else needs to happen for us to wake up? It's as simple as that. We have right now a continent of union of 500 million. There is a lot of talk about the so-called Brussels effect, which means that our outsized significance, especially when it comes to world trade. I feel much better now that we have a new German government who very quickly and very effectively did away with the debt brake. But we must not forget that we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. So let me just underline this in closing. Brussels is a rigid bureaucracy. It resembles most, the Yes Minister. I don't know how many of you may remember this old TV show. The commissioner knows this very well. It's up to us to make sure that the voices of our communities are heard. And that is where I really think that the Delphi Forum can play a significant role.
Thank you very much. And I think this is something that politicians need to keep in mind, that we, the people, are voting for them. Alex, what about companies?
Yeah, so in Canada, we've gotten actually quite good at separating the signal from the noise. Let me just put it that way. And one of the questions a lot of our clients are asking us is what's going on with this ESG backlash? Is there an ESG backlash? And here I want to just maybe talk a little bit about signal and noise, because the reality is, if you look at the underlying data, this is not an ESG backlash or a sustainability backlash at all. Let me just share a couple statistics that I think are really important. There was last year $1.63 trillion in new sustainability debt issuance. That's a 10% increase over 2023. And to put that $1.63 trillion into context, back in 2015, that number was $85 billion. So we're talking about a 20-fold increase in sustainable debt issuance. So these are green transition loans, sustainability-linked loans, social impact bonds, and the like. This is a huge increase. That number increased pretty much in every single region. You know what region increased the most? The United States. There was an almost 20% increase in sustainable debt issuance the United States. And I think it's also important to note that, if we are looking at the US and their sustainability reporting framework, despite what's happening at the federal level, there are a bunch of states like California that have instituted climate-related disclosure requirements. New York State, Illinois, and a variety of others are following suit. And I'll also say too, in the United States, last year was the first year where renewable energy, so energy from solar, wind, biofuels, and other renewable sources, overtook coal generation. So to me, I don't see a sustainability backlash here. I do see a recalibration. I do see a focus on operationalization of sustainability and ESG, maybe less on the regulatory reporting requirements. So this to me is not an ESG or sustainability backlash. I don't see it.
Thank you, and I think this is the hope that we have been promoting sustainable action, and now that we need to move forward, it will be through sustainable action and not just business as usual. Mathieu?
Yeah, just maybe a reflection on the three criteria that the Commissioner was highlighting around long-term sustainability performance, transparency, and external certification. So, and I just give some example maybe to be more practical and less theoretical. So when Eldorado took over Hellas Gold and restart Skouries, we voluntarily enter public consultation that was really embedded into the local community with many different focus group and community meetings on which we were explaining what is mining, what is a project like Skouries, what's the impact of a project, how we pretend and how we're going to manage and mitigate the expected impact in the local community. So that was really explaining how is going to be our long-term performance in terms of sustainability. And now that we are progressing in the construction, now we enter the phase of transparency on which we, for example, we have an extensive environmental monitoring system that's monitored every single parameters of the environment around our operation and the community at the site of our operation. So we know every single component of the environment, and all that is public. So each one of you or everybody in the community can access on our website the result of those environmental monitoring and see if we do our work well or not. and the last, I would say, criteria on certification or proactive transparency and verification by the third party, the Skouries project or the Hellas Gold company is, I would say, one of the companies that have a lot of external scrutiny because it's completely tied into our environmental permitting, on which we have external certification by body commissioned by the Greek state, but also by our lenders. So we have that extra layer on top of regulator of double certification of what we do, how we do it well, do it bad, or how we can correct it if it go a little bit at the side.
Thank you. What I find very interesting is the information, giving information to the stakeholders and the ones who are impacted, so they know what it is for a very big, company or industry operating in their region. So I think this is very important for everyone. Yanis, on the ethics of AI or whatever else you want to.
Well, I would like to use the 2 minutes additional to answer a question you might be thinking when I tell you that AI is a sustainable, is sustainable considering how you all know how energy hungry
is it?
It is. It really is. So actually, it's extremely difficult to quantify. OpenAI is actually not very open about the energy consumption of their chips, but some people have tried to estimate. And with the number of queries, they predict that by 2027, the energy use of our use of large language models is going to be the total use of energy of the Netherlands, Argentina, and Sweden, or 0.5% of the total electricity. That doesn't sound very sustainable. But that was last year. So you are probably aware that, the United States, in order to stifle competitivity, has banned certain chips from being delivered to China, with the idea that, the US is going to develop better technology, or is going to develop actually the large language model and artificial intelligence technology. And then, out of nowhere, in February, Chinese scientists release DeepSeek. And not only did it take everyone by surprise, but it also shows that you can actually develop the technology with cheaper chips that are using less energy. So there is hope that as we develop the technology further, the power hungriness of it is going to be decreased. Let's go back to Africa. So one of the conversations that the African continent had in Kigali last week is exactly that. How can we make sure that as we develop the infrastructure on our continent, we are actually doing this in a green and sustainable way? And Africa believes that because of their resources, like access to water, access to wind, access to solar, that they could actually not only do that for themselves, but also export the extra energy for the global north. And I really hope that that is going to be possible. So one point of ethics is, if you work in development in low and middle income countries, you know that you're always pitting one aspect versus another. What am I trying to say? Does it really make sense for a country like India, for example, to move all in artificial intelligence when part of their population have no access to water, no access to sanitation? In the future, this may no longer be a one or the other. And a fund like the Africa Fund for AI may help that, because it actually complements the resources that are made available, and these resources are fully dedicated for the development of AI infrastructure while not taking it away from other important developmental aspects.
Thank you very much for, again, opening our eyes on what is going on to happen, and giving again an optimistic point of view in this direction, because I'm really not convinced that AI is sustainable. But let's see. Maria, the floor is yours. And
okay. So Kostas reminded me of my European hat. So I wear this European hat always. I think I'll wear it forever. So I would like to remind to all of you that we are lucky because we are Europeans. Don't get me wrong, I'm also disappointed from the Brussels bubble. Everybody's disappointed nowadays. But we are very lucky because we are Europeans, and now our children are here in this Europe area. Why? Because Europe, well, we are 15% of the global population. We produce 35% of the whole production, and we have 50% of the social expenditure worldwide. So we are lucky, guys, and we have to make this Europe better. How? I think that there is only one way, and I would like to be clear about it: unification. Europe is not united. We don't have the basics. We don't have even a currency, a strong united currency. We don't even have a capital market. We don't have an energy market. We have nothing at the end of the day. But we have a perspective. And I agree, Trump made us a great gift. He has given us a great gift. So we are awake now, and we have to follow on that. I'm saying all that because sometimes people think that, how can I say, shooting Europe is the best way to go forward. I think this is something we have to clarify. We need Europe, and we are very lucky to be Europeans. These are my last words.
Thank you. This is, I couldn't agree more, and this is what I always say to my students. Don't ever forget that Greece is a country that belongs to the European Union, and we are lucky for that. Otherwise, see what is going on to the rest of the world. Thank you very much. I think we finished a minute earlier. I think we have...